main piece of advice is try not to buy into the anxiety of everyone else going through these processes with you. It's there. It's very easy to do. It doesn't really help per se, other than just add to anxiety and worry. And so I know that's so easy to say, particularly for those applying to medical school, worrying, am I going to get in? Or those studying for any of the STEP exams, going, how am I going to do? Am I going to pass? Or those applying to residency, making sure I've gone through this whole journey. I want to make sure I match. But I think just by taking that one step, and these processes can go a little bit easier. You can remove some of that burden on yourself. And I think that's really, really important.
Welcome to the Prospective Doctor Podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Pre-med and medical students alike are encouraged to tune in each week for tips on how to become a strong med school candidate, gain acceptance into the school of your dreams, and succeed on your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
Hello, everyone. I am excited once again because we have a super special guest, Dr. Jason Reminick. I'm just going to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to medicine.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. I'm originally from Long Island, New York. I've wanted to be a physician since I was about 12. Had some relatives going through some medical issues and really was in hospitals a lot, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, when I was younger. Always liked science and math, the basic story there. Loved connecting with people. Decided to go into medicine. I ended up going to the University of Pennsylvania for undergrad, studied biochemistry and theater arts, got a master's degree in chemistry as well. Then took a planned gap year, actually worked in pharma for a year to understand how drugs were developed, worked on the research side, developing a drug that was slightly different mechanism of action than the statin for cholesterol. Learned a lot that year, and then made my way up to the University of Rochester, which is where I did medical school. Also got my MBA for business school. And so that was kind of my journey into med school. And while I was there, just really started getting really interested in entrepreneurship and just ways for physicians to build things in medicine and innovate. And what kind of a key point in my journey was I was applying to residency in 2012, got stuck in New York City during Hurricane Sandy. Many of my interviews were canceled, and thought, I wonder if there's a way we can make this more streamlined for everyone. And just remember the challenges of having to write emails and phone calls and trying to get all of the interviews scheduled. So that kind of led me to where I am today as the CEO and founder of Thalamus, which we'll talk about in a bit. But my med journey kind of continued, graduated from med school, made my way out to California, did a residency at Stanford in a combined pediatrics and anesthesiology program. And then in 2018, end of 2018, actually transitioned out of residency to my role at Thalamus full time. And so it's been a really interesting journey. It wasn't one I could have predicted. My clinical interests are mostly in pediatric chronic pain, which is a fast-growing field, a lot of exciting conditions and such. Really blended my interests of both pediatrics and anesthesia and procedures, and just having really detailed histories of patients and having some really intimate encounters, which I've really enjoyed working with patients. So I miss that. But now for my day job, I run Thalamus, which is a residency and fellowship interview management platform. We work with programs all throughout the U.S. and over 90% of applicants at this point. So happy to dive into that as well. But I think that's a pretty good summary of who I am and where I came from.
Thank you for that. I think that it's quite an interesting journey. A lot of people have ideas of what they think they want to do in medicine, but I love interviewing people who are doing different things. Like you said, you knew you wanted to be a doctor. The generic story, I'm not going to say generic, it was my story too.
Sure.
But
yeah.
There's people who come from different routes. So like, we love science, we love people. Why not mesh them together?
Right.
And then you went into research, and then you went into medicine, and then found your love of pain, was helping people
alleviate pain. Yeah, for sure.
So, and now you're in a different route, which kind of started in 2012. So now you're the founder of Thalamus, and we are definitely going to talk a little bit about that. But I'm really intrigued by it because we all know the new natural disaster that happened 3 years ago, the pandemic. So a lot of people did have to shift they're interviewing from being in person and that connection and doing all the touring and getting to know people to having this new kind of skill set of making virtual connections. Can you tell us a little bit more about Thalamus and how your organization is working to help people like our listeners?
For sure. So Thalamus is a software as a service. We're now a growth stage company out of Silicon Valley. We're a very mission-driven organization, and our main mission is to ensure that the right doctor ends up at the right hospital to treat the right patients and vice versa. How that's initially come into practice is a software that we work with individual residency or fellowship programs or entire hospital systems. They purchase the software. They use that software. It integrates with the electronic residency application service through the AAMC or SF Match or other application providers as well for the smaller fellowships that use kind of one-off applications. The programs import that data, and then they invite the applicants to interview. The applicant receives from us an email with a link to create a profile. Takes about 5 seconds to set up. Basically, they're just setting a password, and then they're brought to a calendar where they can schedule their residency and or fellowship interview in real time. Kind of like Open Table, but instead of booking a restaurant, they're booking their residency interview. Back on the program side, it allows them to score candidates, write notes, build rank lists for the match, etc. Provides them kind of a process-specific applicant tracking system. And so that was the original piece that we started with, which we now call Thalamus Core. There's a mobile app for the applicants as well to schedule on their phones. And with COVID and the transition to virtual, we extended our platform to accommodate virtual interviews. We have our own video conferencing platform, which we call Thalamus Video, that we built on our on Twilio, which is a fully web-based platform. We also integrate with Zoom, Teams, and WebEx because hospitals use lots of different things. We have an itinerary builder that builds all of the schedules. We have tools that help faculty review and screen applications. And we also have our latest product, which we call Cerebellum, which is a data dashboard, particularly for programs and institutions that help them assess their KPIs, specifically from either a DEI or a geographic perspective and other key metrics they look at in terms of their recruitment. So we've built a really nice platform. To me, thinking back to 2012 and where I was, it was really important to build something that helps the applicants schedule. And so I've been there. I remember still going out to the interviews, even post Hurricane Sandy, where there were applicants who were paying hundreds of dollars in cab fare to get out to the interview because their car had literally floated away in the storm, and just all these different pieces of people not being able to travel places. And so it's been really important to me to make this process easier for applicants, particularly because I lived through it. Many of my friends did, colleagues, etc. And so I think our key is trying to make that easier really for everyone. We've done a lot of focus on program coordinators and directors and programs and institutions as well. But we've really tried to build a platform and a marketplace, kind of like Lyft or Uber with riders and drivers. We have programs and applicants, and we've really tried to balance and provide solutions to the entire community. And it's something we've been really excited about. We working with thousands of programs at this point. Over 90% of applicants across, we're also working with over 300 institutions up until the recent news, which we'll talk about more as well, and in over 100 different specialties. It's been quite the journey. We've been really excited about it. We're getting good feedback. We're continuing to grow, and it's really just great that our mission is very well aligned with that. And so we're really big on trying to make this process more equitable for everyone, more inclusive. We've done a lot in terms of research to help better understand how these processes work, how the technology works, and particularly with the switch to virtual technology and internet gaps, how do we design software that can overcome those as well? How do we try to make an environment where the video quality doesn't lag for people depending on their internet? We've done a lot speaking with applicants to help prepare them, and happy to go through a lot of that today as well in terms of going through this process, because our main goal is really to make this process easier for everyone. And it's been fun to see the progress that we've made.
That is an amazing story. Like how out of something that was born through something very personal, you're able to help so many, and you've expanded to so many schools and institutions and are able to kind of bridge that gap that people have a need for. I love that you called it like open table for interviewing. So that has to stick.
Yes, for sure.
So you said that there's some new exciting news. I'm going to let you announce it and tell us what's going on with that.
For sure. So on April 27th, we announced a strategic collaboration with the AAMC, and it's something we're super excited about. I know both organizations are as well. I'm excited about it for the entire community. And essentially, we are working with our partners and collaborators at the AAMC, and we're working to build a new solution or an innovative solution to the overall process. And so our software is going to be licensed by the AAMC and provided complimentary to all residency and fellowship programs that use ERIS. And we're very excited about this. For me, again, 2012, Jason, the applicants have told us year over year that we'd really love a single place to go schedule our interviews. And so we can plan better, and so we can see where things overlap. And we know that's the place that we need to schedule. And so we can really just focus on managing our interview season in one place, which is kind of how we always conceive this as well. And we have features where you can use your phone, you can export events off of Thalamus if you're using a centralized calendar to GCal, iCal, Outlook, etc. We also have features where you can use it like a regular calendar, and you can put your grandmother's birthday onto Thalamus as well if you'd like. But the way we designed our system was so any program that invites you to interview shows up in the same calendar for the applicants, and now there will be more programs using it. So we're really excited, along with our collaborators at the AAMC, just really about the amount of value we're creating for the community. And so basically, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of our products, the Thalamus Core platform is being provided along with the Itinerary Wizard and the Cerebellum for the programs that are interested in some of our other tools. They can add those on as well. But essentially, in terms of the applicants, what it really means for them is this more streamlined, central place to manage their interviews. And so we're also working through a lot of collaborative research to study this process to help better understand the UME to GME transition, to help better understand the nuances between specialties, to expand data sets, to really look at how the UME to GME transition is affecting also the broader pipeline into becoming a physician in the United States. And I think over the long term, what that means for the healthcare workforce as well. And so I think the community has been really looking forward to this and asking for this for a while on both the institution, program, medical school sides, as well as for the medical students and who are applying to residency and the residents who are applying to fellowship as well. And so we're super excited about it in the sense that, yes, more and more programs will be using this as a solution. It's a place where applicants can go and count on to schedule, and it's going to hopefully just provide a tremendous amount of value for the community. And that's kind of how we're aligning this overall. We're going to be building new tools. We're going to be innovating over the years. We're really trying to provide more transparency into the process, more awareness, and also to build more trust into this process while hopefully both decreasing anxiety as well as costs. So
I love this. I think that it is revolutionary. It's going to change the way that medical education and the access to even interviewing works, because as you mentioned, you're also working in the equity realm. So there are a lot of barriers that may prevent someone from being able to fly from New York to California to get to multiple interviews and things like that. So people have to decrease or change their lists. So I think that it's a wonderful mechanism. I am dating myself because my process was a little bit further back than yours. So yeah. Even to hear like that people are like scheduling them like that way, I'm from the realm where we of course had the internet, but it was more of like the program coordinator emailing you back and forth, like right. What date is good for you, and you writing it in your calendar. So this is like mind blowing to me. And all the listeners out there, like, don't go in the comments and talk about how old is Dr. D.
Well, I also took a paper MCAT, so like I can date myself also. So,
but we're in new and exciting times, and this is so awesome that it's going to open up a lot more opportunities to the students out there who are going to be the future doctors of America.
Yeah, we're very excited. We've done a lot of research looking into this process, and I think the data is really the most exciting piece in terms of we know based on papers that we've written that geography is a major driver of where people match. And we've done work in anesthesia and also a paper that recently came out in primary care that shows that if you grow up in a state or go to medical school in a state, your highest likelihood is to match in that state, which probably doesn't surprise most people. But we were able to at least show that through the data. But I think taking a step back further, like the implications of that are if you look at states that have many medical schools and many residency programs, that's one particular track. I grew up in New York. I moved to California for residency. Those are states that have many, many residency programs and medical school positions. I now live in Nashville, Tennessee, very different part of the country, kind of in the middle of the pack, but also very different than Arkansas, Mississippi, and other states, Montana, et cetera. And so each state kind of has its own kind of characteristics, obviously, that are driving how people enter the physician workforce. And so if you're coming from a state with a lot of medical schools, you have potentially more chance versus those with less medical schools and just different paths people take. And then you look at that and what happens at the GME level and then to more of a broader kind of macroeconomic level of the physician workforce, and you start recognizing these patterns. And I think from our perspective, this is where it starts to get really, really exciting. So we recently did a study with the California Healthcare Foundation, and we were working with them to look at the representativeness of their physician workforce versus their population and the disparity that exists between the two in terms of that representation. California is 40% Latino by population, only 6% by physician population. It is 6% Black by population, but only 3% by the physician population that identifies as such. And so we started to look into that and kind of understand the data. And what we found was California, while it has the second most medical school positions behind New York, and it has the most residency spots, when you adjust for its population, which is the largest in the country at 39 million, it actually drops to 46th per medical school spot and 26th per residency spot. So we started looking into the data. We saw that there were people who would want to stay in California of all self-identified populations, but actually had to leave the state just because of the number of medical school spots per population. And so when you look at that versus Texas, Florida, New York, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, et cetera, kind of the larger states with med schools and GME programs, and then compare that to others, you see these patterns start to emerge. And yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. There's really important pieces in terms of making this process more equitable from the cost. We also, over the years and just last year, launched a nonprofit called Thalamus.org. And the mission there is to provide students who are underrepresented in medicine with scholarships and grants to apply to residency. And that's something we've been super proud of as well. But when you dive into all of that, this is how the physician workforce in the United States is built. This is the workforce that's going to need to fill a shortage of physicians that's projected to be about 100,000 over the next 10 years. This is also going to have to fill in those additional physicians that we're losing from COVID or otherwise. And so this is why I started with our mission, which we're really passionate about and I think drives everything we do. It started with a software tool to help applicants and programs schedule interviews, and it's just continuing to grow with each step. And so in terms of the collaboration with the AAMC, we're just really excited about the value we can give to the community because I know applicants are concerned, well, what do I put in my ERIS application? What do I write about? How do interviews happen? What do I need to worry about in terms of my dean's letter and now preference signaling, and what does that look like for my specialty versus another specialty, and what is my strategy there? And how do I interview? When do I interview? What time do I interview? Do I interview my top programs first? Do I interview my top programs last? And so really just providing the community more information about the process so that they can feel confident and comfortable going through it. And then leading up to the match, and what does that look like? So we get these questions and we see these year in and year out. It's about disseminating this information. And I know there's concern amongst applicants that there's interview hoarding, and we've done a lot of research. We have a paper coming out about that shows that's a bit more of a myth than I think the general community believes it to be. And I'm happy to dive into any of these more and more. But I think the important piece is that the way you look at these biases in the process, the way you look at these how do I learn more about the process is by measuring data, because then you understand where you are. You can make decisions based off of it. You can analyze it. And that's just not data that we process at Thalamus, but data we give and help provide to the community, along with our collaboration with the AAMC or otherwise, to help people understand this is my path. This is what I want to do to go into medicine. This is what I'm trying to accomplish, and provide them that so they can build those plans, that journey, their narrative, what they want to do with themselves, their life, their career, et cetera, their patients, and beyond. And so I think at the end of the day, that's what I'm most excited about. We're obviously quite excited that we're going to be working with a lot more applicants and a lot more programs going forward. But I think the much broader vision is really what could be truly transformative.
I love everything that you just said, and I feel like we could talk for hours about this.
Sure.
And I'm going to personally invite you back right now on the show for us to do another segment and just talk and dive deeper into that, because I think that it's so important for us to think about these things as they mold, like you were talking about the different populations that are being served in different states, and how people may want to go back home and they may not have that opportunity due to certain barriers right now, and then how that can impact patient care and all of the workforce and all of those things. So there's so much to unpack.
Well, I will accept now as well, and I could talk about it for hours as well, and it seems like we might. So looking forward. So
I love it. You're about to be a friend of the show.
Sure.
So my next question, just kind of keeping in the realm of interviews and things that may be coming up for next season, what are some few key pieces of advice that you may have for the students who may be entering the next interview stage, whether it be for entering medical school versus applying to residency or fellowship?
I'd say the main piece of advice I really try to convey, and I speak with medical schools, I've mentored medical students, I've been involved, obviously, living all of these processes myself. And even just for those people in medical school, it's the same advice. And this is so easy to say, but I think, harder to practice. And I'd say I was only somewhat successful myself. But main piece of advice is try not to buy into the anxiety of everyone else going through these processes with you. It's there. It's very easy to do. It doesn't really help per se, other than just add to anxiety and worry. And so I know that's so easy to say, particularly for those applying to medical school, worrying, am I going to get in? Or those studying for any of the step exams, going, how am I going to do? Am I going to pass? Or those applying to residency, making sure I've gone through this whole journey, I want to make sure I match. But I think just by taking that one step, and these processes can go a little bit easier. You can remove some of that burden on yourself. And I think that's really, really important. I would say that's probably my biggest philosophical suggestion. More tactically, if I was doing this again today, one, I would make sure, and I tell this to the students that I talk to going through this transition, make sure your email address is right on your application. If there is one piece of information that you want to make sure you get right, that is probably the most important information. So check it again, have someone else you trust check it, get multiple eyes on it, and make sure it's right. It doesn't happen often, but there's a handful of students each year who use the wrong email address, and that can delay you getting invites, obviously, because you're not getting them. There are ways to do that as well, to get around that. But I think that is probably one big piece. The other is actually using a .com email address. And I was talking with this yesterday in a few meetings I was in, but I think we're all really proud of where we're going to medical school. We want residency programs to know where we're coming from in terms of medical schools. And some people use their .edu email address, which I think on the surface makes a heck of a lot of sense. I would say on the backside, one, no one's really looking at your email address anymore because you're usually invited through some piece of software, Thalamus or otherwise. The email you put really should be most convenient to you. We also have done some research looking at orthopedic surgery's universal interview offer day. We wrote a paper on that was in one of the orthopedic surgery journals. And what it showed was actually that since applicants, a lot of invites went out at the same time, we were able to study the response time of those people using a .com email address versus a .edu email address. And there was actually a statistically significant difference on the order of minutes as to how fast people received their invite. .com received it minutes earlier than .edu. And so the question then is like, well, why is that? Is Thalamus selectively sending? And the answer is no, of course. But hospitals have firewalls and institutions have firewalls, and these are needed firewalls for data security, given the sensitivity of patient data and other data that lives within the walls of these institutions and hospitals. And so I would have a Gmail account. I know that's been the common practice. We've certainly seen more students use personal email. It doesn't have to be Gmail. I like Gmail. It can be something else. But at the same time, that's going to give you ways to just see your invites without any delay. I'd say a lot of the work we're trying to do is try to slow down this process as well. We have consistently over time showed programs data that says not inviting everyone at once, inviting people in waves, making sure you have enough spots for the amount of people you're inviting, or invite even less people than you have the number of spots. And that gives students more opportunity to schedule, because I know that the other anxiety is once I get an interview invite, I have to schedule immediately. Because if I don't schedule within 30 seconds, it's gone. And in some instances, that's true. In a lot of instances, that's not. And so programs usually fill on the orders of minutes to hours. It is a factor of how many people they invite and how many spots they have. It is a factor of whether or not there is a universal interview release day or time as well, etc. I will say that I think one of the challenges with software is it has increased transparency. And so when students get an invite and come to a full calendar, their first assumption is, well, I was too slow. And in some cases, that might be true. In other cases, the majority of people could have been invited 2 weeks earlier, and they're just inviting a few other people now to fill the rest of their days. And so, back in my day when we had to apply to residency uphill both ways in the snow, that race was still there, but it was a race of writing a professional email, looking at your calendar and trying to respond with your top 3 choices for dates that you may want to come while trying to balance all of your other invites. And so the experience has changed slightly. I think there's just more transparency. And as a result, there's just been this fear that has prevented applicants from, going into the subway because they might lose service, deputizing family members to sign up for interviews for them, making their Apple Watch and their phone and whatever else they can beep with a different tune or a different notification anytime they get an invite. And I'd say there's a big push, I'd say, by specialties through us, the AAMC, by others involved. The NRMP did some really great work in implementing interview protocols and guidelines into the match participation agreement as well, which I think was a really great step forward given their oversight of this entire process and their ability to do that too. And so I'd say there's a lot of push from the organizations and us and others and specialties and programs and applicants to try and make this process more humane for everyone. That's always a balance as you develop technology, but I think we're excited too because, right, going back to our mission, like it's a very human mission. We want to make sure that at the end of at 2 a.m. that a patient who's having maybe the worst day of their life and in the hospital is talking to a doctor who they trust and getting that best care that they need. And so this is why all of these things matter, because who responds to an interview, butterfly effect, can actually, in some ways impacts that encounter that's going to happen 10 years from now. And so this is why it's important for us to develop these strategies, but we want to get the information out to students. So long meandering answer here, but yes, don't buy into the anxiety. Use a personal email address. Respond as quickly as you can, but don't beat yourself up. And also know that there's a human being on the other side, program coordinator and administrator, who I think are the superheroes of GME, who can oftentimes help you. And so it's not this, if I don't get an interview spot immediately, I'm never going to interview with the program. I'm never going to be a doctor. You can write to the program and you can ask. You can say, hey, I didn't get the invite, or, I would just be honest. I wouldn't make up these stories that I was hang gliding and then I landed in the side of a mountain and I had no service or what. It doesn't have to be these elaborate stories, but I think just really like, I'm interested in your program. It doesn't seem like there are any either spots available or spots that work for my schedule. Is there anything you can do to accommodate and or add me to a wait list for a date? And you can, of course, wait list yourself for dates in these tools as well. But really just knowing that on the other side of this, there are programs and people who are trying to help you and want to help you. And so I think that is really important as well.
I loved all of those pearls. There are two that really stood out for me and for the listeners out there. We've had quite a bit of people talking about interviewing over the past 2 years or so in which I've been hosting this, but I've never heard about using the .com versus the .edu. So that is fascinating to me, and I definitely want to look further into that paper.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that definitely stands out is what you started with. Like, this process is long. There will be people who do extremely well on their MCAT, or there will be people who get a billion interviews for whatever reasons, the community service they're doing and the shadowing they've done, all of these different things. When you get into medical school, there will be people who take their exams in 15 minutes and do quite well.
Right.
And you might take longer, or you may do better in your clinical years. So there's always going to be someone doing something differently or something quote unquote better than you. And comparison is the root of all evil. So you're there for a reason. You're doing your process, and your process is your own, just like your journey is your own. So it's okay to chat with the other people who may be your classmates or your colleagues and learn from them, figure out what techniques work for you. But your journey is yours, and that's okay to own. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really important, because now with the internet, you have Twitter, you have Reddit, you have these Google spreadsheets, which I think are all really, it's great to disseminate information, but you also have to take with that information how it relates to you. And so there may be people who have a lot more interviews than you that you see on the internet. They could be part of a couple trying to couples match, and couples have a very different journey in that they need to try and match in the same place, or at the very least the same city or a city close, so that they can still be a couple and not have to do too long distance of a relationship through residency, which is of course quite hard. It could be someone who, struggled in medical school, or is really just trying to be in a particular geographic area. And so there's a lot flying around the internet, which I think is creating additional anxiety and just ways to compare. But yeah, as you said, it's your own personal journey, and take the steps you need to take to know that you did what you needed to do in the process. There's this little sense of doubt in all of us as in med students, or one way or another, that maybe I won't match. And most people, most statistically do match. There's different populations, obviously, from U.S. grads to IMGs, and I know the statistics and understand the nuances of such. And so definitely there's that concern depending on what applicant pool you're applying from and your own journey. But again, it's your journey. And so there's ways to overcome that. I love the metric of distance traveled in terms of talking about diversity, equity, and inclusivity as well. Like, that makes you an amazing doctor, overcoming hurdles and building character. And these journeys, I would not have guessed what I'm doing today is what I was going to want to do, even a few years ago. But it's just what happened. And so, a lot of people talk about, I want to match at my number one. There's a lot of research that shows if you don't match at your number one, you can be very happy. And one of the nice things about the match is it smooths out a lot of this. In October, spots are very, very coveted in terms of interviews. As people interview throughout the season, and then January and February come around, you see a lot of cancellations, and you see a lot of people then being able to interview who didn't have interviews. And we've looked a lot, and, as I mentioned earlier, like, do I have to interview at my top choice, my first interview or my last interview? It's very hard to know what's better or worse there, other than if you interview, you're eligible to match at that program. And the nice thing about the match is it in many ways, and the way it was designed, it mathematically levels the playing field. You as an applicant get to pick, based on where you've interviewed, your preference of where you want to train. And then the algorithm takes your preference, because it's applicant preferring, and then compares it to the program's rank list, and then fills based on how they've ranked the applicants that they've interviewed. But your preference as an applicant drives that more than anything else. And so I'd say the other really big important piece of information when it comes to building your rank list is rank the program you want to go to most of the programs that you've interviewed first. I cannot stress that enough as well. You're not inconveniencing yourself in any way. the algorithm was designed this way that if there is a program you want to go through first, it doesn't matter whether you think you're going to get in, whether you're not going to match at that program, whether you think you're definitely going to match at that program. That's the program you put first. And then the program you prefer second, you put number 2. And I know there's a lot of, you can have a whole session just on how to build your rank list and what Excel spreadsheets people build and or not. But I think that's the whole piece. It's your journey, and then it's your preference. And the fact that there is a match smooths all the noise that happens in the application and interview process out, and in many ways builds a really nice, perfect mathematical solution of where everyone ends up. That's not to say that it isn't, the whole process, again, isn't anxiety provoking, and the fact that, yeah, we all want to know where we've matched, and it's really, really important. But at the same time, like, that smooths a lot of it out. And I think it also buys you the ability to be kind to yourself throughout the season, knowing that it is a marathon. It's going to take time to get through all of this. Don't burn yourself out in October. Don't worry if I didn't get an invite from a program on the first day or the second day after Eris opens. We've looked a lot to the data. Most invites go out in the second, third, and or fourth week. In some specialties, it doesn't go out to the 6th or 7th week. In some programs, they don't invite until late October or early November, depending on the program and the specialty. So there is no one size fits all, regardless of whether you hear what you hear on the internet or otherwise. It's all about a personal journey. And this is the data we want to get out to the community, because I hope to the listeners that this provides at least some comfort. I know we can't make this a completely anxiety-free process. There is clearly a lot at stake by how hard everyone has worked over their lives to get to that point. But I think it's also really important to celebrate that you've gotten to this point. And whether you're applying to medical school, in medical school, applying to residency, or otherwise, the number of people in the whole world who get the opportunity to even say they've reached any of those steps is a very, 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 very small percentage of people. And so I think this should be continuously celebrated, because you've done incredible things if you got to any of those points. Or if you're listening to this in middle school or high school right now and you're just dreaming about the future, like, be kind to yourself as you go through this. Figure out if it's right for you, and figure out how you can plan your journey into this profession, this calling, and beyond.
I couldn't say it better myself.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are just so many things, and you're right about the journey. Is yours, own it. So You've shared so many pearls of wisdom with us. We're unfortunately coming to the close. So I love to ask all my guests about this question, because the answers are so different. So my question for you is, if you had a magic wand and you could change anything about the healthcare system, because it's perfect, blah, 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 we don't need to change anything. But if there was something you needed to change about it, what would you do?
I think it's cliche, and it's what we've talked about today, but I think it's what we're trying to do right now. And on a personal level, and just on a academic, philosophical, emotional, etc. kind of level, I think it's really important that this process is as streamlined as can be for the physicians. We spend all of our life going through and preparing for med school and beyond. It's very costly. Tuition's costly. Everyone's coming out with loans. It's one of the only processes where applicants have to spend a significant amount of money at all stages of the process. And I've seen too many of my friends, colleagues, students that I've worked with, residents that I've worked with, etc., burn out along the way, or have unnecessary hurdles that I don't think need to be there. And I think at the end of the day, that's important, because the financial burden we're taking on, the emotional burden that we're taking on, the self-sacrifice of your 20s and or 30s and or whenever you go through the process and beyond cannot be overstated enough. And so I think what more we can do for ourselves and our profession to innovate, to make these transition points easier, we're going to see benefits on the patient care side as well. Because even with the number of people that are interviewing year over year, one of the research papers I talked about in terms of the same state studies that we were doing in primary care, one of the biggest takeaway points from that paper was tens of thousands of interviews could be eliminated annually and everyone would still match at the same places. And so when you think about that interview being an hour between an applicant and or a faculty member who is practicing as an attending, and just the number of patient care hours that are affected by that as well, just on the very surface, like you start to see the broader implications of this overall process. And so I think the more we can make this process easier, it streamlines into everything else. Physician reimbursement, how the federal government pays for residency training, how the hospitals think of the resident as a trainee versus an employee, and whether they try to retain them at the end of their process and have them be an attending in their physician workforce, the makeup of the physician workforce, the representativeness of the physician workforce, the diversity of the physician workforce. Like, this is all coming through this process. And so the more we can make this both more enjoyable, less costly, less anxiety provoking, more resilient, less likely to create burnout, the more we can do for healthcare. I can nerd out about this forever. It feels like we could as well. But I think at the end of the day, like, yes, this is an important process because this feeds the entire physician workforce that's going to have every patient encounter with every patient in the United States and beyond are going through this process. And so the more we can do for this process, and that's why we're excited about collaboration with the AAMC. That's why we're doing the research that we're doing. That's why I wake up every day super passionate about what I'm doing. And just, I guess my other closing piece is that I would also just change that physicians should have more pathways to innovate and build in healthcare. We have a perspective that very few do. I understand the need and the importance of giving your full self to clinical practice. And historically, that's been kind of the straight path. I think there needs to be more discussion about how we as physicians can also be non-clinical and also lead in healthcare, or a hybrid of some sort as well. I think we have the ideas. We're on the front lines. We're having the interactions with patients. And so the more we can do, the more discussions we can have, the kinder we can be to ourselves that there are multiple pathways in medicine. I think we do a lot to improve and innovate on a lot of what we discussed today as well.
You're preaching my language.
Yeah.
Yes, we have the ideas, we have the clinical experience to merge with it, and it's okay to explore other passions and do multiple things and kind of the skills that you're gaining now during your training are definitely transferable. So don't have that fear of, I don't know enough, or I'm just a doctor, or I'm just a cog in a wheel. We have the power to innovate, and the time is now. Even when you're in school, there are opportunities in which you can partner, you can learn, or you can create things that you're thinking about that aren't out there yourself. So I love that conversation, and that's something else we can talk about.
For sure.
But for now, so we won't have a 2-hour podcast.
Right.
How can the listeners reach out and learn more about Thalamus, whether or not they're students, if they're institutions that want to learn more, and things like that?
Yeah, so our website is ThalamusGME, like graduatemedicaleducation.com. All the information about our products and software and how to use it is there. We have knowledge bases and such. Personally, the best place to find me is probably on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Jason Reminick that exists, but I should definitely pop up on LinkedIn as well. I'm not on Twitter. We are ThalamusGME, as we are on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn as well. So there's a lot more information that people can find there. For institutions that are looking to contact us, there's lots of, and/or applicants, there's lots of ways to contact our team on our website as well. That'll get routed to the right people, whether you'd like us to come speak to your students or learn more about anything about Thalamus or otherwise. And so lots of different ways to find us. Google too, obviously. But yeah, personally, I'd say people should reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to reach me personally. And yeah, I wish everyone a really great recruitment season this year, to those that are applying either to medical school or residency, or those that are thinking about it. Super excited again to be here. Appreciate you having me. And looks like we're going to have more conversations. So looking forward to those as well.
Absolutely. And for all of the listeners out there, feel free to let us know if there are any particular topics or guests that you want to chat about on @MedSchoolCoach on our Instagram or my personal Instagram. Dr. D Graham, spell out Dr. DOCTOR, the letter D Graham. And I'll see you again next week with another guest. Bye.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward med school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.